Thank you so much for clicking play and joining me on this episode of She Got Next, a series that features diverse and dynamic women that make the industry of sports go. And my guest today is the epitome of that definition: diverse, dynamic, making the industry of sports go. I'm joined here today by Nzinga Shaw, also affectionately known as Zing. Zing, thanks so much for joining me on this Monday.
Thank you, Olivia. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Before I dive into your incredible resume, you've had a number of roles in sports. I kind of want to talk to you about something that I saw on LinkedIn recently and get your feedback from it, if that's all right.
Please.
So I saw this post again on LinkedIn, and it was a well-meaning in my mind, but the photo had a picture of a mug, and on the mug it said, "We are not DEI hires. We are qualified." And it was like, hey, Black women, we're qualified. And people were making comments like, yes, we're not DEI hires. I wanted to punch the screen on my computer. I was so angry at that. In my comment I left, I said, we are both. The two are not mutually exclusive. I am not willing to hand over for redefinition the term diversity, equity, and inclusion. I also have anger issues with wanting to punch my own computer. But I wonder how you feel when you see those kind of images being posted, that language being used, and the redefinition of that term in that role. What comes up for you?
You know, this is a good way to start a Monday for sure. I will say that anger is not the emotion that I initially feel when watching that. I've been a diversity officer for a very long time and have seen and witnessed a lot of different types of opinions and different interactions with people as it relates to this space. So I'm never really shocked. What I will say is that framing any one individual as a thing like a DEI hire is very offensive. And it certainly, it lends to this notion that diversity equals deficiency, which is not true. Diversity does not equal deficiency. If anything, diversity aims to dimensionalize the room, tries to bring new insights into any space, and really just broadens any way that you're tackling issues and problems. So, you know, this conception that DEI is a negative thing and that the phrase itself should be recoined, the language is offensive, it's illegal. These are all misconceptions. Unfortunately, because of the world that we live in right now, with social media being so prevalent and really just anyone being able to take a microphone, say what they want to say, and things can go viral very quickly, I think that DEI has been bastardized based on a few individuals who are not happy with all people getting equitable experiences. And so because some of those people happen to have loud voices, they happen to be well known, or whatever the case is, they have the ability to have reach very quickly. And so, you know, lies can be spread, misinformation can be spread very quickly. I think that's what we're seeing play out. But I try not to get angry. I try to educate. You know, I have a lot of information that I have acquired over time as it relates to DEI. And so I try to present compelling business cases, things that I've experienced personally or even have studied in terms of the theoretical work that I've done to bring truth to misinformation.
See, this is why you occupy the C-suite, Zing. You are a chief storyteller. You're telling a story right now, again, about your experience, about the kind of data and informed opinions and experience to help educate people about what DEI really is and how it can really add to the bottom line, grow the bottom line of organizations. There's been data out there for decades around showing that when the more diverse your workforce, the better you do. And I mentioned at the top, you've had a couple of different roles in sports, in HR and the NFL, and most notably, if you don't mind my saying most notably, as the first ever Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the Atlanta Hawks and for the NBA in general, a role for which you received a ton of recognition, a lot of accolades. If somebody was making a top 40 under 40 list, your name was on it, as it should have been, including the Sports Business Journal.
That was before I was over 40.
Yes. The Sports Business Journal in 2018 named you a game changer, a straight up game changer. And the Atlanta Business Journal They wrote this at the time, and tell me if this is accurate. It said Shaw hopes to restore respectable dialogue to society and says one uniting force that can kick it off is sports. Now, first of all, that's a big hope. Restoring respectable dialogue to society is gulp. That's huge. Mm-hmm. And this was in 2018. So it was like at peak shut up and dribble era back then. And then seeing sports as the uniting force for changing that dialogue. Looking back at it now, your time with the Hawks, you were there for 5 years. Again, the first ever person to hold this position in the NBA. How successful do you think you were with those two big goals?
Personally, I think I did experience some success. However, I think collectively the industry experienced a lot of success in terms of the sports industry. I also think the National Basketball Association as a league became a trendsetter and said, we're not really looking at our peers for acknowledgement or for their approval. We're going to do the right thing and hope that others will come along by watching our actions. And so I would say collectively, we had a lot of success. I think a lot less individualistic in this instance, but I will say it was a very lofty goal. And the reason that I had such a lofty goal is because I think there's only a few industries that can touch the masses. Food touches everyone. That's one of these industries that is never going away. We need food to survive. Music is another industry where you can just really find a lot of connectivity. You look across the aisle and see people connecting through song. Even in places, I've traveled internationally in a place where I didn't know the actual verbal language, but went to a party and danced all night because the beat was good and everybody around was having that same type of fun. And the last industry, of course, is sports. You think about all of the different sports that we see athletes play, not just in the United States, but globally: soccer, lacrosse, track and field, basketball, football, baseball, and the list goes on. It's one of those things that brings people out in large numbers. You look at the Olympics that just took place in Paris. I want to say it was one of the most populated Olympic games that we've ever seen. The NFL, when you look at the Super Bowl and how many people watch it, not only in person, but on TV. I think they have over 100 million viewers at this point. So for me, when I thought about what is the large problem that we're trying to solve in society and what vehicle can we use to help bring people together, for me, it became very simple: sport. If you put out messages of unity, messages of love, and you use athletes to help tell their stories, and you use the platform itself to bring people together, even like what the NBA did in the middle of COVID, creating the bubble and saying, we're not going to stop playing because we have this thing going on. We're going to find unique and innovative ways to still engage in what we do. That was because of diversity. That was because they had a lot of different voices at the table saying, okay, yeah, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, which is something that we've never experienced. However, the game must go on. What can we do? When you start hearing all of these different perspectives, that's when you start getting innovation. And so for me, that was the big thing. It was, how can I use this industry to spread messages of unity and love at a large scale and start to watch people behave differently and interact differently? And I think we saw success.
I was watching the home run derby, Major League Baseball. Baseball is my favorite sport. I was watching the home run derby, and there are athletes that are coming from all over the world, a lot from Central America. And baseball recognized that there is a language barrier for some, a more opportunity for us to be exposed to a different language. And they had someone on the field that was not only asking them questions in English, but wanting to ask them questions in Spanish for those who are watching all over the world, so folks in their hometown can participate. And that, in my mind, is equity. That is providing opportunity, inviting people from all over the world, again, who speak different languages, to participate in the sport. And that's a unifying approach to fandom. And it helps, again, to expand the brand by doing that. And thinking about what the NBA is doing now currently, are there particular things that you can look at and say, like, I had a hand in that. I'm glad that they see that there was some success there and they're amplifying it now?
Absolutely. I think the NBA is doing a really good job of engaging new communities, whether it's the Latino community, whether it is the LGBTQIA+ community. They are really going deep to not reach out to these communities and say, come look at us, we're the NBA, figure out how to get with us. But it's more, I would say, proactive outreach and really trying to lean in and understand what are the things that differentiates this community from others? How can we meet them where they're at? So, recently the NBA has been doing a great job, I think, of making themselves accessible to the LGBT community through showing up at their local pride parades. These are huge gatherings of thousands of people showing support for this community that has certainly in many ways been underserved and overlooked. And I think the NBA is saying, look, we're bringing our athletes out. We're showing our solidarity with the community, not just in self-serving ways, but showing up for you, not just through Pride either, also through a lot of nonprofit service that they do with organizations that lean in that space. So that's one thing that I think is awesome. I also like the different heritage nights that are being celebrated at NBA games, whether it's Hispanic Heritage Night or Black History Month events or Pride Night, Pan-Asian awareness. I mean, the list goes on, but the NBA is looking across the aisle and they're saying, who needs to be celebrated? Who do we need to give visibility to during our halftime show? How can we show connective tissue that we're not just here for ourselves, but we're here for all? And I love that. I think that they do it really, really good. I'm not bashing any of the other leagues because I think that other leagues are also getting very involved with new communities. But I think the NBA has been at it for a long time. And it's almost like a very well-oiled machine at this point.
Yeah, there are some leagues that are doing other things to kind of expand their global reach, right? The NFL is playing games in Mexico and places in Europe. The NBA is really booming in Africa. Major League Baseball, some of their beginning games, kicking off the season, happened in Asia. So these leagues are understanding the global market and again, positioning themselves to celebrate the diversity around the world and open up their fandom as a result of putting those cities, those countries, and all that talent in the limelight. Now, in reading about what your role was with the Atlanta Hawks, it seems like you created and implemented strategies that really embedded diversity, inclusion into every aspect of the business and making sure that that front office talent represented, again, likely the fan base. Can you tell me a little bit about what that looked like? What did it mean to embed DEI into the processes?
Well, a great question, Olivia. I would say first, I realized that DEI, or diversity and inclusion, it was called when I took the job, was not an HR function. I was very intentional about making sure that my role reported to the CEO and not to HR, because I think, and I'm a trained HR professional. I grew up in HR. So it was really getting away from my roots to do something different. And the reason that I wanted to do and set up the infrastructure that way is because when you are in human resources, you're really just relegated to the employee experience. So whether that can be vast, don't get me wrong. It's all about hiring and talent identification and then cultivating that talent once they're in-house and figuring out ways to help them grow and elevate, looking at compensation models, looking at benefits. All of these things in the employee life cycle are critically important. But there are so many other facets to our businesses, including finance, including marketing, including consumer products, including events, legal. And so for me, diversity is one of those functions that really needs to be embedded into your holistic business model in order for it to really do the things that it aims to achieve. So I came to the table with a very clear idea for why this job should report to the CEO. He and I had extensive conversations. He agreed that was the right method, even though it was not popular. I think we were very clear that we're not doing things because this is how it's been done. And we're not doing things because of public popularity. We're doing things because they're the right way to do it. And oftentimes you have to be the first in order to test something new. Yeah, so we were both aligned in that way. And I'll tell you, something even as simple as marketing. I made sure to work very closely with our chief marketing officer and the marketing team so that when we were thinking about new and emerging demographic sets that we wanted to start to engage with. What's the best way to do this and not offend anyone? So at the time, the MBA, we had been doing all of these different nights, celebration nights. And I remember that for Hispanic Heritage Night, the MBA started to name the teams Los or L, whatever the team's name was. So for example, they called us Los Hawks. And it was supposed to, in theory, show solidarity with the community, show that we're trying to meet you where you're at. But we heard from the Latino community that that was very offensive because there actually is a Spanish word for hawks, which is halcones. And so if you wanted to say the Hawks, you should have said Los Halcones. And so for me, I realized, okay, if we're going to be doing this diversity work across the board and working with marketing and other business functions, we actually need to understand and have cultural competency so that our good intentions and good efforts don't show up as a miss because we lacked the knowledge or the sensitivity to come to the communities in the proper way. So that's just one example of how diversity got embedded in the company and how we made decisions about things that we would do with new fans.
Well, you talked about, reporting to the CEO and wanting to do things the correct way and not just the way that it always been done. Being the first ever chief diversity inclusion officer in the NBA. And there weren't that many folks holding that position across global brands at that time anyway. What gumption, what get after, what gave you the fortitude, the drive to want to take on such a visible role in such a popular industry at that time? Like, where did you get the guts from?
Well, I created the role, believe it or not. So I was working at Edelman, which is a PR agency, the largest one in the world. And I was an HR practitioner and I was doing a lot of diversity work. I was actually in charge of diversity at Edelman as well. And we got a call from one of our clients who happened to be a law firm that was doing an investigation for the Hawks. And they didn't tell us who they were doing a legal investigation for at the time. But what they did say is that we have a client that we think will likely need counsel across dimensions of diversity, mostly race relations. Based on our legal investigation, it seems like there's a high chance that there have been some wrongdoings at this franchise, and we're going to have to take a deeper look. And so they were calling us for PR counsel. And so the guy who was in charge of crisis counseling was on sabbatical for 5 weeks. And he happened to also be a person of Black descent and understood race relations. But because he was nowhere to be found, they asked me if I would get involved in the client work. And I said, well, I'm not really a client counselor. And they're like, well, don't worry. You don't necessarily have to be. You just have to bring your good insights to the table and help us understand race relations and the dynamics that could be at play. And so I literally just jumped into an opportunity that was thrown at me because someone else wasn't around that was really the core expert at the time. And I brought my good energy, my good insights, and started to learn about what was happening at the Hawks and realized this is the year 2014. We're in the city of Atlanta, which is the home of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We are the city that is coined the city that is too busy to hate. And so to hear some of the things that were being revealed was shocking, alarming. And I realized in that moment, they need a diversity officer because we just saw something very similar happen at the LA Clippers with their controlling owner, Donald Sterling, who was forced to sell his part of the team, et cetera. And so I was like, this is in close proximity to the LA Clippers having a racial crisis.
Yep.
Now the Hawks are having a racial crisis. And I just want to leave my job and go be the person to fix this stuff because this is ridiculous. And so I that was one of my suggestions during the counsel that I was giving the team. I said, you guys need a chief diversity officer. And the CEO was not aligned at first. He said, I don't know if that's a real job. It's no such thing in the NBA. And I said, that's exactly why you all have problems. So after, several weeks of going back and forth and the issue wasn't going away, there was a lot of accountability being demanded from our fans, from our stakeholders, from our sponsors. The CEO decided that he wanted to implement the role. And when he made that choice, I said, all right, I'm going to apply for this job. And he said, no, don't do that. Like, I understand it. It sounds great, but it's going to be really tough. It's going to be messy at first. We're probably going to get new owners. I don't know if they're going to be aligned with it. It may not last. It might be a 6-month thing. And I said, look, I'm willing to take all of that on because I think that the upside has so much more than the downside. And I certainly want to be part of the change. I want to get in the lab and kind of mold and shape what this thing could be. So I'm willing to take that chance. I'm willing to give up my stable job that I've been on for 5 years at Edelman and go do something that's never been done. And honestly, it was the best decision of my whole professional career.
That's incredible, especially hearing the fact that the CEO was telling you, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. It's too risky. And you're like, I can't not do this. To have all that in a city, a historical city like Atlanta, it had to have felt like, as a fan, a slap in the face. And then to have you take on this role, I'm imagining that you were confronted with a lot of people who were very angry and weren't thinking that you were just like a placeholder. Look, we did this nice thing. We hired this woman. It's all going to be okay. Talk to me about what that fan relationship was like for you. And changing, again, hearts and minds, so they felt like they can show up again and be real fans of their home team.
I'll tell you, I will never forget my first day of work. When most people start a new job, they're excited. You might get flowers on your desk from your colleagues. You get invited to lunch. All of that did not happen for me. What happened is that the head of PR at the time said, you need to come to the arena in about an hour because there are people outside who are not happy about you being here. They know today is your first day of work. They believe that this is a fraudulent position. It's never existed before. It's coming to life right on the heels of a public facing crisis. So they just really want to hear from you.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know what to expect. I just went out there and I said to myself, I just gave myself a pep talk and I was like, just tell the truth. Tell the truth. Tell what you're here to do. Engage them, tell them that you're not going to do this by yourself. Like, they care enough about this, they're going to help you. And so I went out there and there were some angry folks, including people from mission-driven organizations that were, I would say, very African-American or Black focused. And they wanted to ensure that I was not there for performative reasons. And they asked very direct questions like, is your role a bandage to cover a wound?
Yeah.
Or, you happen to be a Black woman. Are they trying to put a Black face in front of a white issue? These were questions that I was asked. And so I was always positive. I always said, look, I can't tell you about the intentions of anyone other than myself. So if I was hired for the wrong reason, time will tell. However, I took this job with the intention to do the right thing, to serve the people that deserve to be served, which is everyone, and to help create more positive race relations in this franchise and in the city. And that's what I'm here to do. And I can't do it alone. So since you all are out here and it's clear that you're passionate about this topic because you're spending the time with me, I want to ask you all to be the first set of people that helped me get this done. I'm going to start a diversity council. It's going to be different than any council you've ever seen because most diversity councils are made up of people in the company. My diversity council is going to have folks that are in the company and out of the company because we don't have all of the insights internally that we need to get this right. If we did, we wouldn't be here. Right. So I'm going to need, you all to dig deep and give me some of your time because I want to make sure your voices are being heard, that your ideas are being implemented. This is not the Zing show. And they were open. I think when you approach a crisis with openness and just honesty about what went wrong, I think you meet people where they're at and they feel more apt to deal with you versus making excuses for why something happened or not just being honest that things were bad. People don't like that. People don't like to be lied to. So I think I got some early supporters because of my approach. And I had a great council of people, half internal, half external. We did a lot of awesome work. But I just think the words that you choose have to be selected very carefully when dealing with these type of sensitive issues. And you also have to show up, right? So it's not about showing up when the cameras are there. It's like, I'm showing up when the cameras aren't there. That I had to roll up my sleeves and do things that a lot of people wouldn't do. maybe weren't pressure tested to do, but the city was relying on me. The fans were relying on me. My family, my friends, like I just had to get it done.
I had a guest on the show a couple of weeks ago, LaChina Hamilton. She's currently the VP of Fan Growth and Community at the Washington Spirit, a soccer team in the NWSL. And she said this about you. When I asked her about women that have inspired her, she said, Zing is absolutely phenomenal. What I love about Zing is she has always been authentically herself. I have always seen her be willing to help students and those behind her. Now, you were shouted out as someone who made an impact on LaChina. I'm wondering if you could shout out somebody who helped you find that confidence to take the risk, to confront communities, to kind of bring people together, to have that circle, to take on this role, to say yes when people are telling you to say no. Has there been a person or a couple of people who really have been in your corner throughout this journey that you want to shout out right now?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Natara Branch. She was Natara Holloway when we met. She was at the NFL league office with me. She was a long tenured employee. I think Natara was at the NFL I think she hit 20 years. So when I got there, she might have been 10 years into her role. And she was someone who I looked up to for a lot of different reasons. She is an African-American woman who happened to become a vice president at the NFL when I was there on the HR team. And it was just a very hard process to become a vice president at the NFL in general, whether you were a man, a woman, Black, white, Asian, Latino, in LGBT, it doesn't matter. Your demographic set didn't matter. It was your acumen, your ability to move effortlessly across the league, which is a very dynamic place, very multidimensional. And she, stepped up to the plate and was able to shine in a very hard environment, particularly for women, particularly for people of color. She happened to be both. She was the only Black woman VP at the time when I was there. And she was also very young, and I feel like she was confident. She and I would have long talks, and she would almost be a peer mentor, not a peer because she was more senior than me, but she wasn't the most senior. But I certainly gained a lot of insights, a lot of real talk from her. I was able to just watch her, the way that she moved, and it influenced the way that I moved. So it wasn't necessarily that she said, dress like me, but I noticed that she wore suits a lot. She always looked very polished. And so I started to step up my game. So Natara Holloway Branch is a woman who is just a phenomenal human being. She's not at the NFL anymore, but she's on publicly traded boards right now. She is a new mom and just enjoying her best life. So she's got next for sure.
I'd like to spend the last 5 minutes of the show asking you 5 questions, if you don't mind, sports-related questions. Tell me about an early sports memory that you have, something that made you a sports fan, something that may be coming to your mind right now, whether you were an athlete when you were young, you're watching something on TV, but something that has stuck with you. What's coming to your mind right now?
2 things are coming, but the one that I'll say is I ran track and field in high school. I was a very good athlete, and I remember always telling my parents not to come to my meets. I don't know. That would embarrass me. And my dad showed up at one meet. I had no idea he was in the audience, and I ran my tail off. I won the 800-meter dash. He was so excited, and I remember being excited that he was there. I didn't know that I thought I would be embarrassed for them to show up, but I actually was really happy that he got to see that moment.
What about a sports movie that you quote, or sports movie that you go to, or that you were inspired by? Anyone come to your head?
Oh my goodness, there's A League of Their Own. I mean, that's just, I don't necessarily use quotes from that movie, but just, I just love that deep old story of baseball, and seeing Madonna in that movie. I thought she showed up awesome as an actress. That's one of the movies that stands out for me in the sports space.
That's a popular one. Now, I typically ask people how they're making room for the next woman in the industry of sports. I talked about LaChina Hamilton already describing you in a way where you're making room and making sure you answer questions and are available for young people to learn from your journey. Is there an overall goal you also have in addition to that, where you're making space for people who are coming up behind you?
Yes, there's two ways that I'm doing that. So the first way is that I am the chair of the board of an organization called Rising Media Stars. Our founder is LaChina Robinson. She is an ESPN analyst. She called the women's basketball games alongside Dwayne Wade at the Paris Olympics. I mean, just a rock star. And so being able to be chair of the board for her organization, which we target women of color and we provide them with opportunities to do sports broadcasting. So a lot of the young ladies that are coming up in the field that didn't know how to break in, didn't have a way in, we're providing them direct opportunities with ESPN, TNT, Turner, the list goes on. And for me, I feel like we're making a difference. There's a young lady on TV right now. She's an ESPN analyst. Her name is Andrea Carter.
Yes.
You've seen her.
She's amazing.
From us. She came from us.
Wow.
She came from Rising Media Stars. We met her when she was a baby. She was at University of Tennessee and got totally immersed in the program. And now she's a total rock star. So that's one way that I give. And I'll tell you, the other way is through my teaching. So I am a professor at University of Tennessee, and a lot of my students are student athletes. And as you know, University of Tennessee is a Division I school. So a lot of these athletes have a real chance of going pro. Like, you know, we're the home of Peyton Manning, and Justin Gatlin went to University of Tennessee. I mean, you just look at the athlete roster. It's ridiculous. It's insane.
Yeah.
And so Candace Parker, you know, like, so I talk a lot to my student athletes, particularly the women, about what it will take to have a career in sports. How do you navigate even getting seen or evaluated by teams, leagues? Should you go to a league first? Should you go to a team first? What makes sense for you? Do you have to be involved in a professional male sport like my career path, or is it okay to work for women's sports organizations? Which I think the answer is absolutely yes. So yeah, through Rising Media Stars and through my students at University of Tennessee, I'm looking for the next generation of young women who are going to take this thing to the next level. I know they're out there. They're definitely sharp, and I just got to make sure I help get them ready.
I think you're doing it. I think it's an incredible time right now for any woman who wants to get in sports. And if you're able to be in broadcasting, you become the next Miss Carter on ESPN, who's calling WNBA games. She has so much insight. I mean, she's one of my favorites. She just breaks down the game so incredibly well. So insane to hear that you're saying that she came from that organization. I'm going to have to go.
We just added her to our board.
She's incredible. She's
our
incredible.
First alumni. She's our first alumni board member.
And of course, LaChina is an OG. Like, she's been contributing in so many different ways, and I love her play-by-play. So, like, again, the legacy that you're building, the people that you're bringing into the fold, I think it's incredible. And it's been incredible to be able to have you on She Got Next. Thank you so much for your time and for your inspiration and for the journey.
Oh, thank you, Olivia. You're amazing, and keep going.
Thank you so much.